There's one thing that we can all admit, it's that terrestrialization has been a relatively polarizing mechanic when it comes to a lot of mods. And so, with a new format on the horizon in the form of Pokémon Champions, I think there's a lot of mods that are going to enjoy it not being there. And some of these mods are a culmination of stuff that has been previously good that I think can return to past glories, or some new tools that might just prefer Terra not being in the game. And I want to talk about them today. How's it going, guys? And welcome to episode 5 of the Road to Champions, where we're going to talk about mods that I think are going to be a lot better in this metagame compared to their SV counterparts. If you guys have been enjoying the content and this series, please do let me know in all the classic YouTube things. I don't like shilling in every video, but you know, it's how engagement works, I guess, on this platform. Especially if I'm doing this sort of series which is all hype-based, which I think you can forgive me for that one. And without further ado, I'm not going to waste too much of your time with this intro. Let's get into some mods that I think are going to be a lot better when Champions rolls around. We begin with a mod that is near and dear to my heart, because those of you that have known me for some time know that I'm a fan of my pink blobs. And this thing was one of my Aurus darlings, and still is. Its Usum variation wasn't quite as good, but was still a fairly decent healing wish bot in the right teams. And in Swish, there was points where it shined, and points where it stunk. But it's still a fantastic mon, and I think a lack of Terra is going to do this thing the world of good. So, let's talk about Clefable. Clefable has every tool that it could possibly want, that it's managed to keep over the generations. It can be a Calm Mind or Cosmic Power setup set. It can just be defensive support with access to Encore, and T-Wave, and Rocks, and Wish, and Healing Wish, and Trick with Magic Guard, meaning you can trick Sticky Barbs and things like that. And it has all the coverage it could possibly want, even as a Life Orb Magic Guard breaker. The issue that Clef is going to have is that it can still get two-shot by things because of power creep being as insane as it is, but I think that Clefable is going to be able to thrive a lot more in this metagame compared to past ones. Fairies were not a required thing to draft in Gen 9, and the main reason for that was the existence of Terra Fairy for any of the Scary Dragon matchups. And I've talked about dragon types enough, and there'll be more dragon types coming up later this week. So it's one of these things where having a fairy is going to be essential. And I think Clefable is probably going to be one of the best ones in the early metagame. And obviously the power creep is still there, but you're no longer going to have, Terra Poison gunk shots murdering it, and unaware sets should still be able to deal with some of the setup mods. I think Clefable is a fantastic mod if the metagame suits it, and I think Champions will suit it quite well, because of it returning to a slightly less aggressive, slightly less powerful, and bulkier metagame. Obviously this is not addressing the elephant in the room, which is Meg Clefable existing, which I think will be an interesting mod. I'm not sure how good it's going to be, solely because of the fact that I'm not sure how much the flying typing helps it, although Air/Access might be a fun tool in some very niche circumstances. Clefable, I think, is one of these mods that's going to benefit hugely, and I wouldn't be surprised if its price is a little bit more than its current SV range at 11. Let's continue talking about some fat things that ran the metagame at one point. When this thing was first introduced in SS's DLC and was kind of realized it's actually a good mod, this thing ran the metagame for some time. In an era where it was fat regen balance, where it was constantly paired with Torn T, and the results were very clear to see. You look at Gen 9, and while yes, it started off relatively well because it was one of the best fairy resists in the tier, overall it just got power crept, and it wasn't able to keep up, despite getting a bunch of fun new tools in Gen 9. I'm talking about Galish Slowking here, and I think those new tools that it got, and its natural bulk, and returning to a metagame with no mechanics, is going to be quite beneficial. It does have the same problem with Clefable, as sometimes it will just get two-shot by things that you'd think it shouldn't because the power level can be a little bit ridiculous, but this thing still has the Assault Vest sets with its great coverage. It can still run Nasty Plot and Calm Mind. Chilly Reception is going to be a really good tool in terms of using it as a pivot, meaning that it can match the Slow Brothers, who I think are going to keep Teleport. Who knows, realistically. And you also have access to Toxic and Toxic Spikes, as well as T-Wave. So you can be a major disruptor, as well as Slow Trick. You can be a Trick Room attacker. Slowking still has all the versatility that it could possibly want, and in a metagame where it's going to stick around a hell of a lot longer, this thing should be able to shine once again. As time went on in SV, it quickly got very outdone by Petrunt, a mon that suited the metagame perfectly because of its ability to be the best spin blocker in the tier, had access to Malignant Chain, which was just relatively stupid as a move, and it could parting shot around, as well as having good nasty plot set matchups sometimes. Slowking, I think, is capable of replicating that in a metagame where it's not getting sniped by Terra Grand EQs all the time, and I think Slowking is going to see a hell of a lot more play, similar to those Prime SS days, or maybe even those early SV days. There's been a bit of a recurring theme so far when it comes to these mentions, and that is mons that have previously excelled in generations past that I think are going to excel again. And this thing is no different, having been one of the best mons in 2 of the 4 previous draft generations. Generation 9 was not kind to this thing. It didn't have its main tool in knockoff at the start of the gen, and with there being so many top tier dark types, it was really hard for it to get traction. It did get a bit of usage as the generation went on, the DLCs came out, it got knockoff back, and it still did the wonderful things that it did, but its power level wasn't quite there. The other darks were far superior, and Terra also just meant that it wasn't even as good at revenge killing as it used to be. I'm talking about Weeball, and I think once Terra goes and it gets back to a fatter metagame that it might also get Pursuit back in, which would be unbelievable for it, I fully back Weavile to come back to its best. Even in Usum, it was still pretty good because it could Pursuit Trap and it had the speed tier. And obviously it got better in Swish because Triple Axle existed, meaning Icicle Crash was no longer as important. You have all the stuff you need between them, Ice Shard, and then Low Kick plus Poison Jab to deal with the matchups that aren't great, such as your Steals and Fairies, which sometimes are relevant, sometimes aren't. And you have the Bandit sets. You have Life Orb sets. You can run Heavy Duty Boots with SD. There's a lot of options with this thing. The dark types in question, I'm not 100% sure if they're going to be as good. Roaring Moon, Masquerada, and Darkrai, being the main 3 that were introduced, are obviously going to be fantastic mods. And with the introduction of some other mega dark types that I think are going to get some serious play, that are faster and stronger than Weavile, maybe this thing doesn't quite get as much renaissance as I would like. Although, I do think it's still very much in line for one, and I do think it will be getting some play pretty early on, assuming that its price doesn't get to a ridiculous level. Like if it stays at its SV price, or maybe slightly higher, I think it's going to get a lot of play, and I think it's going to be very successful. Those first 3 that I mentioned are mons that have had their day in previous metagames, and I think are just going to get back to former glories. So let's spice things up with some new mons for these final few. I'm going to start with a mon that was Terra banned itself, because with Terra it was far too broken, and even despite that was getting some usage, but then was outclassed by a counterpart that was introduced in Gen 5, and just did not appreciate dealing with Terra Fairy whatsoever. I'm talking about Baxcalibur. This thing has all the tools it could want to be a fantastic physical breaker. You have Swords Dance with access to Scale Shot and Icicle Spear, making the loaded dice sets really prevalent, and you can also Dragon Dance, because Glaive Rush is a super reliable dragon stab that's stronger than Outrage, and you still have your great coverage in the forms of Earthquake and Iron Head. This thing is a fantastic physical attacking pseudo that just didn't quite get the chance it needed in the SV metagame after its Terra ban, because of the fact that Fast Terra Fairy was something that was very easy to take on, and made a little bit of a one-trick pony, making Kyurem the more superior dragon ice type at times, despite both of them being Terra banned, of course. Excalibur, I think, is going to benefit a lot from Terra Fairy not being a thing anymore. That means that the fairy types have to switch in, and Excalibur can break through an awful lot of what I think are going to be the meta-relevant fairy types. You combine that with the fact that it does have access to Ice Shard, and Thermal Exchange could be quite good in a metagame where Scald might have a better move pool. All those things together, and I think Excalibur is going to be a fantastic breaker in this tier. You saw that in Legends EAOU, that it was a mon that was doing incredibly well, because the fact that switch-ins were just at a premium. And that's not even mentioning the fact that it now has a Mega, which I do think will be allowed. I'm not sure how good it's really going to be, but that's one of those things where time will tell. Excalibur's a great mon, and I think it'll reach new heights in a Champions metagame. Let's end this on Annihilate, a mon that I have famously tiered wrong on a couple of occasions, but have ultimately been proven right about 3 years later. Shoutouts 13-point Annihilate and Kickoff, which I got serious hate for. Yeah, those were the days, huh? But Annihilate is one of those mons that you would think on paper would benefit from Terra. And that was the case in the early days. But as time's gone on, Annihilate has just been seen less and less. And even if you do see it, the rare time, it fell into that mid-tier Terra Captain bracket where it got outshone by mons such as Iron Crown, Urshifu Rapid, and Iron Moth. A lot of irons in that sentence. But I think Annihilate could benefit a lot more from a more balanced metagame, as well as a metagame where there isn't Terra, because that means the faster stuff can't just Terra and blow it up even better. And people forget how good a typing Ghost Fighting is, both from an offensive and a defensive standpoint. That has a lot of resistances, which means there's a lot of hits that Annihilate can come in on to boost its Rage Fist. And with its set variety, from sets such as Assault Vested to General Support to Choice Scarf to Choice Band to the bulk up with like Taunt or Encore or the bulk up rest sets, there's a lot of different ways Annihilate can go. And if you get it wrong, you could heavily pay the price. I think Annihilate is going to be fantastic in this new metagame, especially because of the fact it's that bit fatter and it should be easier to stack Rage Fists compared to what SV is as it stands. There's a reason that this thing got banned in Legends EA OU, even though it was mostly not even using the bulk up sets. It was using Assault Vest or Choice Scarf. It's just fantastic. The coverage is still great. It has all the utility it could want with Taunt, Encore, it can Rocks, it can run Scarf Final Gambit to get rid of something. And overall, I think Annihilate is going to prove to be so much more worth than its current price tag. There was a bit of a shift towards the end of the generation, particularly on the Wi-Fi side of things, as people started using Annihilate for the mod that it is, and I think that's going to ring true when Champions comes. There is a hell of a lot more mons that I could have mentioned, but I think limiting it to 5 gives me a nice balance. And it allows for some nice discussion in the comment section of mons that you think are going to be a lot better. And please do let me know down in the comment section below the mons that I've missed and the mons that you think are going to be majorly different in Champions metagame compared to SV. I will see you guys all tomorrow, where we're going to go over some buffs, a completely separate matter in terms of making mons better for the new metagame. Peace.